So that's really interesting. The World Happiness Report usually has, like you said, the Nordic countries on top because the main dimension that they focus on when analyzing happiness is the cognitive dimension. But there are other reports that focus on the affective dimension, which is short-term emotions that people feel on a daily basis. And those actually, very ironically, compared to the World Happiness Report, usually have poorer countries on top. They usually have Latin American countries like Colombia, El Salvador. Can you elaborate more on the difference between the cognitive and affective when it comes to, like, what kind of questions do you ask in a survey that differentiates between the cognitive dimension and the affective dimension?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, you call it ironic, but it actually makes completely sense. When you measure the life satisfaction, the cognitive or evaluative measure of happiness, the question, or we ask people, and this is what they use in the World Happiness Report as well, the Cantrell ladder question, which is something along the lines of, on the scale from 0 to 10, where do you feel you stand at the current time in your life, where 0 is the worst possible life you can imagine and 10 is the best possible life you can imagine. In this measure, when you ask people this kind of question, they can think of anything. It's a completely subjective measure, but it doesn't make it less valid because we as individuals are the only people who can determine how happy we are. So when I consider personally, what is the worst possible life? What would be a 0 for me? I'd probably think of life as a Syrian mum where my husband's died, my 2 elder sons were killed, and I'm the sole provider of my 3 youngest sons or daughters, and we are fleeing. That's probably the worst possible life I can imagine. And then I have a perception of the best possible life as well. This might differ from person to person, but it's my subjective idea about where do I stand. And in this measure, in the evaluative life satisfaction measure, the Nordic countries come out top because when we take all things together and add our lives up and consider how are our lives, we might not feel happy or joyful right now, but we do feel that we are living in welfare states, we've got economic support, we've got a stable base, we've got freedom, we've got safety, we don't have much corruption or hardly any. We have free healthcare, we have free schools. This gives us an enormous freedom. We have a good economy, and all of these things I've just mentioned are drivers of happiness in the life evaluation kind of measure. So if I am to compare with the affective measure, and why did the Latin American countries score higher? Well, it's because the affective measure is about how joyful do you feel? And the question that is usually asked in this sense, it could be done in different ways, but the question that's usually asked is about, I think they ask you about yesterday, because obviously today hasn't really happened yet. So they ask, how much did you laugh yesterday? How often did you feel joyful? And generally, how was your day? And that can differ completely from country to country. So if you'd ask a Finnish person, now the Finns are top of the rankings of the life satisfaction and have been for 2 years, Finns might not come across as very joyful people. They don't smile a lot, or maybe they joke, but they have a dry sense of humor anyway. So they might, like Danes, be very satisfied with their life when they do the evaluation. But they might not come across as sort of happy here and now, even though they might be so, but they don't come across. Whereas the Latin American countries, well, when they stop thinking about corruption, when they stop thinking about the lack of wealth or the lack of safety, and just think about how happy are they here and now, they're very good at enjoying life. They're very good at appreciating what they have. And I think this is why it makes complete sense that there's a difference between which countries come out top, or which regions, actually. I think one country that's especially interesting is Costa Rica, because Costa Rica comes out top in both kind of rankings. In the World Happiness Report, this time they added an affective measure, and Costa Rica came out number 4 in the affective measure, but they came out number 12 in the life satisfaction as well. So they're just good at both, which is amazing.